Hi, I'm Adam Busby from the Culinary Institute of America. Today we're going to explore and learn about Maine lobster. We'll learn about harvest times of lobster, we'll learn about purchasing lobster, and we'll learn about how to cook lobster when you're at home. There are many different types of lobsters available, but the true lobster from the east coast of America is Homarus. And here is a beautiful example of a 1 1/4 pound Homarus lobster. The most important consideration for purchasing a fresh lobster is that it's alive. Take a look at the lobster, make sure it's full of movement, whether it's in a tank or not. The different parts of the lobster we have are the tail, the head, the 2 claws, and the 4 sets of legs on either side of the lobster. The claws are interesting that they're different. On one side we have the crusher claw, and on the other side we have the pincer claw. The pincer claw is really used for the lobster to reach out and grab the food that it's about to eat. Once the lobster has grabbed its food, it'll use the crusher claw to break the food into small pieces. Then, using its feet and the pincer claw, it can feed the food into the front of the lobster where it's consumed. Here we have 2 examples of Maine lobster. Maine lobster grow in cold water and are harvested within about 10 miles of the coast. The size of the lobster is measured with a small gauge, and the gauge is inserted just behind the eye socket and then measures the distance from the eye socket to the back of the head shell here. In order to be able to harvest these lobsters, this measurement here needs to be between 3 1/4 inches and 5 inches. If it's smaller than that, the lobster has to go back in the water. If it's longer than that, the lobster has to go back in the water. So lobsters come in a variety of different sizes, but that's the first and primary measurement. A few other things that lobstermen take into consideration when harvesting lobsters is whether the lobsters are female or male. A female lobster that has an egg sac underneath its tail flukes here will also have to be returned to the water. But before it's returned to the water, the first right tail fluke here will be notched with a knife, and a small V will be cut out of it. This is so that if this lobster is caught again during that year or in future years, the lobster fisherman will know that this is a good breeder and a good producer. Therefore, this lobster is not to be harvested. And this is part of Maine's program to keep lobster as a renewable resource so that it'll be around for generations to come. When you're purchasing a lobster, it's actually quite simple to tell whether the lobsters are males or females. In the lobster tails, these flukes here are called swimmerlets, and the very first pair of swimmerlets are how we tell whether a lobster is a male or a female. This lobster is a female because the first pair of swimmerlets are soft and they have feather-like appendages on the edges of them. This lobster here, by contrast, is a male, and we can tell by looking at its swimmerlets that they are firm. The next consideration when purchasing a lobster is the size. Here I have an example of a cull, and what a cull is, it's a lobster that is missing 1 claw. Now, lobsters are unique in the fact that they have an ability to regrow missing legs and missing claws, but this one was harvested and missing a claw, so this would be purchased as a cull. This is a small lobster, about 1 pound, and this would be called a chicken. If it was slightly larger, about 1 1/4 pounds, it would be called a quarter. A select is 1 1/2 to 2 1/2 pounds, and then jumbos are 2 1/2 pounds and over. On average, a lobster grows about 1 pound every 8 years. Here is an example of a spiny lobster. Spiny lobsters are different from Maine lobsters in several ways. First of all, they come from warmer water. Spiny lobsters are harvested from Southern California right through Mexico and the Caribbean. The main difference you'll see between the Maine lobster and the spiny lobster is, first of all, the fact that there are no claws on the front of the lobster. The Maine lobster is revered for its succulent, juicy meat in the front claws and the tail, whereas this spiny lobster from the Caribbean, the main meat is focused in the tail. The spiny lobster is not usually found whole like this in the marketplace, but instead, 9 times out of 10, you'll find the tail. The tail of the spiny lobster is usually removed from the lobster and frozen and brought to market that way. If you see it in the display counter, many times it is defrosted, and as a result of this freezing and thawing process, one normally finds that the spiny lobster is not as juicy and succulent as the tail or claw meat from the Maine lobster. Although lobsters are available year-round, winter time is when they're at their low season. During the summer months, July, August, and September, lobsters molt or lose their shell. As they regrow the new shell, the meat inside the lobster is a little softer and a little more watery. From September through December, lobsters are at their peak season. Their shells are hard and the meat is juicy and succulent. In order to get the best fresh lobster, one should be sure to get lobsters from Maine. If you can't find lobsters from Maine close to you, you can go on the website www.lobstersformaine.com and you can find retailers that will ship lobsters straight to your home. Once you get the lobsters home, we recommend cooking them immediately. But if you need to store them, lobsters can be stored for up to a week. Storing the lobsters should be in a container that's large enough to allow them space to move, but they should also be covered. Ideally, one would use seaweed for this, but if you don't have seaweed, you can use some damp newspaper. Once the lobsters are covered, place them under refrigeration and they will keep for up to a week. If you notice the lobsters starting to become sluggish, you should cook them immediately. There are a variety of different ways to cook lobsters, and during this series we'll explore many of the different ways that can be done. So join me in this video series as we explore the many ways that you can cook and enjoy Maine lobster.